Hey everyone, if you can hold tight for just a second, Spencer will be on in just a minute.
All right, good evening. So hopefully you all can hear me. Sorry, I was having a bit of a technology issue there a second ago. If you're calling in from a phone, if you could please put yourself on mute, that would be great. Keeps everybody from having too much feedback. But we'll go ahead and get started. I know we'll probably have some more people trickling in here, but we'll go ahead and get started. And it should not take too long. This webinar is mainly going to go over all of your preparation needs and whatnot, but we'll start off, of course, with introductions from our end and go through all the details because MGA is not that far away. All right, so hopefully you all can see my screen as well. So first, well, let's see if technology will work with me. There you go. So again, this webinar is going to be going over pretty much all of the preparation that you need to do. And hopefully between now and MGA, which is not that far away, we've got less than 3 weeks, but more than 2 weeks left. So hopefully you all have gotten emails from myself and from Jeremy to pretty much go ahead and kickstart off your preparation for MGA. There, we'll also go over some procedures and whatnot. There have been a couple of changes to the lobbyist program this year. So if you have been before, there's a couple things that are going to be different overall. First thing, you've got, well, one, the lobbyist program this year is excitedly very is a little larger than what it has been in the past, which is great. Where there's about 30 or a little bit over 30 of you this year, which is awesome. So we are very excited about that. This is Jeremy, who you hopefully have received an email from. If not, contact your advisor, let them know. They'll let me know as well, and I can forward you all of the information that we've sent out so far. But Jeremy will be your point of contact between here and MGA, as well as myself if you have any questions. But Jeremy should be able to answer any question that you have. He used to be a lobbyist. He also was an officer as well, and last year he was the lobbyist coordinator. So he's doing it again this year. He's super excited. He's in college, so unfortunately he's in class right now and could not be with us, but I completely understand that. But he wishes to give you his warm welcome, and hopefully he'll be joining us a little bit later, but that also depends on when this webinar ends, which should not be but too late. The second person, because I actually did not have a great picture of her. This is more of a funny picture that I had grabbed that I'd taken this weekend with the college staff, and we had their training. So the other coordinator that you're going to have is Tiffany Pereira. She is also in college. Jeremy goes to Princeton University. Tiffany goes, I cannot remember where she goes. I want to say JMU. But that's escaping me on the moment. But they will introduce themselves, of course, to you. Jeremy has already done so. And they'll be working with you. Tiffany will, of course, be helping out at MGA, but Jeremy's going to be a bit of your point of contact to help with your preparation. So you can go through him, and then Tiffany will help him out as well. So those are your 2 college staff members, your 2 lobbyist coordinators. This is for the Commonwealth team. This is you all. So these are your committee assignments, which if you have not gotten yet, they're also on the app, which I meant to include in this webinar, and I did not. But the app, if you have not gotten it, you can probably receive it from someone that is your advisor should have the app information as well, or someone that attended one of our workshops should also have the app. And you can get your community assignments up there as well. This is the Commonwealth team, and this is the Old Dominion team. To also give a welcome on our call, I don't know if she's able to. I know she's having to call from DC right now, or log in from DC. So Sharon, did you want to say hello and maybe say a couple words before I move on?
I'm here. Hello. I don't really have anything else to add. You're doing a good job.
All right, good deal. So, and I forgot to introduce myself as well. Shows you my brains. We're this close to MGA. Sharon and I are in 500 different directions, so our brains aren't always caught up to what we need to do. But Sharon's the executive director of the Y, and she's there. She'll be there at MGA as well. So you'll see both of us running in probably opposite directions, going all over the place. I am Spencer Snyder, the program director for the Y. So we'll both be working with, of course, you all and college staff members. So we're super glad that you're going to be at MGA this year. And hopefully you all have now, by this time, have gotten your committee assignments. But here's some purpose and expectation. One is pretty much your entire job at MGA is to influence legislation, influence the vote. What people don't really know about lobbyists is that, and both in real life and at MGA, you pretty much have control of the outcome of how legislation happens. You're busy working in the background, influencing the vote and making sure that the vote goes your way and that the Attorney General and the Youth Governor sign legislation how you want them to sign it. Don't worry, it doesn't always go the way you plan, but with a lot of hard work and good effort, that so which is great. The same thing, so as I was talking about, you influence legislation. As the second point, you are technically non-voting members in committee. So you cannot vote on legislation, unfortunately, but you can speak on legislation. In fact, this year, one of the changes is you can speak twice to legislation. So first, and you can only speak in committee. You cannot speak in chambers at all. You'll have something else to do in chambers, which I'll talk about momentarily. But in committee, you will be able to speak first on legislation. So when debate first starts, you'll be able to speak, and then you'll be able to speak a second time right before the vote happens on a bill. So you'll be able to influence how the debate goes on the bill, how the committee will debate. You'll be able to influence in which direction they start debating, and then of course you'll have the last voice before the vote occurs. So it's a great position to have, especially since you can't be voting members. But that's one of the ways that you can kind of influence the vote and influence how a bill will. How the outcome of a bill will happen. Well, you should be speaking on every bill that you see in your committee. You will be following the same bills throughout the entire process at MGA. So if you're the committee that you're assigned to, unlike senators and delegates, which they have to stay in the same committee. So if a senator is assigned to the Committee on Education, when crossover happens on Saturday, they will, or on Friday night, they will actually see the House bills after they're done with the Senate bills. You all, if you're assigned to the Senate Committee on Education, then you will follow those same bills to the House after crossover happens. So you'll only see the same 5 or 6 bills throughout the entire time. And of course, that will lessen as the process goes on, because some will unfortunately fail and will die out. As is the process, but you should plan on speaking on every bill in your committee, and we will expect that of you, and we plan that of you, and we will be counting how many bills you speak on. So make sure you're ready to speak on every bill, and it's expected of you. While Chambers is in session, I talked about that before. You you will not be able to enter chambers, but there is another process that I'll talk about with chambers that you'll be able to do. But your other job is to work really with legislators. If you want to contact, of course, bill patrons, contact bill patrons or talk to legislators that are there that are in your committee or that you're friends with that go to your school or whatnot, and you can kind of use them to help get your voice out on the floor and to help do the things that you need to happen in committee that you necessarily can't do as a voting member. So you can definitely utilize legislators. And of course, you can utilize the youth governor as well during chamber. So go and visit the youth governor, go and utilize and talk to them, and you can highly influence. If a bill you're hoping that will fail or pass, the last person that has the final decision on every single bill is the youth governor. So if you need one to fail and it has made it to the governor's desk, then you need to convince them to try to veto it. If you want it to pass and it's made it to the governor's desk, you need to convince her to sign it. And of course, there's as you have seen, there are more than one of you in each committee. And many of the committees, not every committee, but many of the committees, there's 2 lobbyists. You do not have to have the same opinion. You can be of opposing opinions. Your opinions are yours, so you have to figure out what stance you want on each bill and decide that way through research, which I'll talk about in a second. But you should be, using your time wisely and using, of course, the governor to try to convince the youth governor and other members to vote how you want them to vote. One of the other points, make sure you're on time in meetings. You have an 8:15 meeting every morning and several meetings throughout the day, even while chambers is occurring. So make sure you are where you need to be. Pay attention to your schedule that you've been given. It's been emailed to you, and you'll have one at MGA as well. But make sure you pay attention to that. Attendance is taken. If you're not present, we'll know, and it'll be a problem. So make sure you are at the meetings and at the locations you're supposed to be, including committee. Jeremy will be looking, he'll be gathering your information probably at MGA if he has not started so already, about getting your contact information, your cell phone numbers or whatnot. I'm pretty sure most everybody will have something of the sort there at MGA. And basically, he'll get your cell phone number so that way you can all be put into a group me, so you can all contact each other without having to swap information. So, and that's how you can quickly get a hold of Jeremy and myself as well, in case you have any questions while you're not in the meeting. The last thing I was going to talk about is research. So yes, while you should be doing research on all of the bills that you're going to see in committee. So look at whatever committee you're assigned to, look up what bills are in that committee and become the experts on them. You should do extensive research. You should have a stack of research. Create a quick reference sheet so you can find quick references to that. You need to fill out those case forms. That'll help you where you can remember what your stance is on that bill, what research you have, and what points you want to make for that bill. So fill out the case forms. I'll talk about those in a second. But you need to do a lot of research on each bill. It's imperative. You are supposed to be the experts in the committee. In actual chambers, the actual General Assembly, the legislators look to lobbyists for information because they don't always necessarily have the answer, and lobbyists typically have a lot of knowledge in the field that they represent. So with the many different fields and different bills that come forward of the General Assembly, they a lot of times rely on the lobbyists to provide that research and information to them that they do not have. Before I continue on talking about case forms, I forgot to mention, if you have a question at any time, there is a comment section on this webinar that it looks like a little comment bubble. You can type in your comment there, and Sharon will, of course, let me know that they have one, and we can answer that for you if you have a question, or you can wait till the end, and we'll have time for questions if you have any. Anyway, so moving on to case forms. I talked about this a second. This is a case form that I mentioned before that you need to fill out for every bill. Required to fill these out for each bill that you have in your committee. Again, this will help you at MGA to remember what research you have, but you should have a lot more research. A lot of research done on each bill. Excuse me, there we go. So committee process. This is kind of what I was talking about before. Basically what will happen in the very basic part of committee process, which you should also have received a sample committee procedure with both the amendment process, which I'll talk about amendments in a moment, and the committee process, which can help out. But basically, for each bill, the patron will explain the bill, then you as a lobbyist get to speak on the bill. Then committee will debate on the bill, in which case, while the committee is debating, you cannot talk. You're not able to talk at all during debate, unless the chair wants to allow you to answer a question. Sometimes they do that, that's up to them. Then afterwards, before they vote, they may motion to vote on the bill, but before they actually vote, you get to speak one last time, in which case you can kind of make some final remarks and maybe answer some points that have arisen during committee, which I highly suggest you do. And then, of course, they'll vote on each bill afterwards. Now, technically, you do get to speak on each amendment as well. During the debate process, when the committee is debating, sometimes amendments can be introduced on a bill. If that happens, you are able to speak on each amendment as well. So you can kind of give your opinion whether you're for or against an amendment, which I'll talk about more right now. So for amendments, you can create. You can create an amendment. They're in your bill book. Of course, we'll send the amendment form. I'll send the amendment form to Jeremy and have him give it to you if you want to write one out ahead of time. If you look at a bill as you're reading one that's in your committee and see that you really want some changes to happen in order for you to support this bill, then by all means, write out an amendment. But there is some restrictions you have on that as a non-voting member. One is you can create one, but you cannot introduce one. Meaning the only person that can introduce an amendment, which is during debate, is a committee member. So you can write one, but you have to give it to a committee member and convince them to introduce it for you. They are the only ones that can introduce it. You can also not vote on each bill, and you cannot vote on each amendment, but you can create one. So if you have someone in that committee that you know or befriend, or maybe they're from your school, you can convince them to do that for you. That's awesome, and highly encourage you to do that as well. Work with legislators in committee or even the bill patron. There are some bill patrons out there that if they know that lobbyists can make or break them on their bill. So if you're willing to work with them on something, say, hey, I don't want to support this bill currently as it is, but I'm willing to support it if there's these couple of changes. A lot of times those bill patrons may be willing to make those changes. So work with them on that, and even the bill patron will support it. So by all means, work with them on that. So during chambers, I talked about before, you cannot enter chambers. You're not allowed, only legislators are. What you are supposed to be doing during this time is, one, you're observing the gallery. You're watching throughout the time in the gallery. But what you can do is you can pass along information that you want to have said on the chamber floors to a senator or a delegate. So if you're watching, maybe some bills are coming up in your committee, or you're watching a bill and you really think a point needs to be made, or you have some research on this topic that is going to be beneficial, write it down on a sticky note or something. Put the name of the person you want it to go to and the seat number, and then go down to the chamber doors, and inside the doors will be college staff members that you can hand that note to, and they'll pass it on to whoever you want. But it does need to be relevant to MGA and the college staff members have full authority to read every single note that gets passed, just to make sure that it's MGA appropriate. But that is a great way to get your voice heard on the floor, even though you cannot enter. Happens every year. It's a very good way to get your voice heard and get information across. And there are a lot of times there's just notes being passed back and forth between lobbyists and legislators to get that information. And you can also, if you need to speak to a legislator or speak to a senator or a delegate, you can ask the college staff member to see if the lobbyists will come out of the chamber so you can speak to them out in the hallway and maybe give them more information and talk to them more one-on-one. You can do that. It's very effective. I highly encourage you to do that. That is a great way to utilize your lobbying skills and to truly influence the process. As I talked about before, you'll have several meetings throughout the day. Even while Chambers is going on, you will have meetings to kind of strategize, and Jeremy and Tiffany will have information that they will relay to you as well for the next process, whether it's the next committee or whatnot. So make sure you're at those meetings. And if you have any questions on what to do about a bill that maybe is giving you trouble, talk to Jeremy, talk to Tiffany, and they will be able to help you out. Also, I was talking about before, utilize the Youth Governor Attorney General. I spoke about that. You know, you guys can be very influential in that process, and it happens every year. You change people's minds. You change somebody's mind, or the entire committee, or the Youth Governor Attorney General, just by having that research and information, being experts on those bills. Of course, that information that they probably don't have. Last point is, while in Chambers, of course, throughout those strategy meetings, you'll also prepare for the next committee meeting as well. So here are your here's your schedule for Thursday, Friday. As you can see, there's a lot that you break for. Just a reminder to make sure you're at each meeting, as I've said before, but there's there's a couple that are at the hotel, but most of them will be in the Senate Room 2 of the Capitol. If for some reason you're in a strategy session and the bills of your committee are coming forward and you want to be in the gallery listening to the vote to make sure things go the way that you want, ask permission from Jeremy or Tiffany if you can skip that meeting or arrive late, because that is the reason, and they'll most likely excuse you, so that way you can be on the be there to make sure everything goes the way that you want it to. So that's really the only acceptable reason to miss a meeting, and you need to get permission ahead of time for that. Other than that, I believe that should be it for the schedule. The only other thing I believe that I want to mention, so as you may have heard, the General Assembly building is being torn down, so we're now using the Pocahontas building, which is on the other side of the Capitol. In the Pocahontas building are which is where the Old Dominion House and Senate will start, and then the Commonwealth House and Senate will end. It's also where a lot of your committees are going to be, and it's also where you will have the press conference. The Youth Governor has a press conference every year, which you will have questions prepared for them. It is a great opportunity for you to get the Youth Governor and Attorney Generals basically their position on any bill or any topic that is at MGA, and really get it on record, because reporters are there as well, ready to write on topics, and will have questions themselves. So this is now in the Pocahontas building, where the press conference will be, and it's in an actual press conference room, which is awesome. So we will have that. Of course, this is Saturday. Saturday is pretty much where we wrap up everything, and you'll have final sessions as well. So you're scheduled a little bit shorter, but it's because a lot more happens at closing session. A couple of notes on what to bring. Of course, you need to bring your bill book, your research, and your case forms. But you also, I recommend bringing Post-its or something that you can use to pass notes with. because again, you'll want to do that. Also, if you need to get some kind of information to committee members while debating is occurring, considering you can't speak during the debate process of committee except for the first and last point, then you can also pass information to a committee member as well. Any questions? You can unmute yourself and ask questions. You can write them in the question or the comment section. But if you do have questions, type them up in the comment section. I see Jeremy has logged on, so hopefully he has access to unmute himself and he can introduce himself and say hello.
Hi, everybody. Spencer, you want me to do that now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. How's it going, everybody? My name is Jeremy Nelson. If you came last year, I was the lobbyist coordinator then as well. I apologize for being a little bit late. I just got out of class, but the good thing is that I have a whole room to myself now that professor and students are gone. So I'm really excited to be coming back to MGA. This has been so meaningful for me over the last couple of years. And the special thing about the lobbyist program is that you really get to run around the entire conference and make an outsized impact. And I did not understand that when I came to MGA as a lobbyist a few years ago for the first time. I thought that it was kind of a small role, but when you really put your mind to it, you have the ability to influence senators, delegates, and the governor's administration. And so you're in a really special position to make an impact.
Good deal. Yeah, and Jeremy, we put your traditional photo that we have of you up there. So I did kind of talk about you a little bit, and said that you'll be kind of their point of contact up until MGA and during MGA. So good deal. Yeah, Jeremy's done this before. Also, I see there's a couple of questions. How do you arrange meetings with the youth governor? That is a great question. So the youth governor's office, you really don't need to arrange a whole lot of meeting. You kind of show up to the executive office, which is across from the MGA office. It will be labeled as the executive office. You can walk in there, and if they're free, there will be a member of one of their staff that will come out and kind of greet you, and you just say you want to speak to the youth governor, of course, and they'll invite you in to sit down and speak with both the youth governor and the attorney general. So you don't really have to sign up ahead of time or anything. You just kind of go to the office. One of the things that is a benefit to the lobbyists is that the chief of staff for the youth governor happens to be Jeremy's sister. So you at least all have some kind of in on the executive office. So that's a plus, which I don't even know if Jeremy knew that, but now he does.
I did know.
Okay, good
She's
deal.
She's a lot smarter than I am, though, so do with that what you will.
So there you go. All right, so let's see, there's another one. So how we want to exactly look up these bills and the information on them. So the bills are in the bill books. If your advisor has not given you your bill book yet, ask them for it because you have to do preparation ahead of time. If they do not want to give it to you, then you can email me or have them email me, in which case I'll say, yes, give it to them. You need it. But you do have to remember to bring your bill book because I know some advisors keep the bill books until MGA because they're afraid people are going to lose them because we don't have a large stock of any. And Sharon made you all pay money because she's very neat in order to replace it. I'm only saying that because I don't think she can respond right now, which is great. But anyways, so look at the bills in your bill book. Okay, she can't hear me, darn it. So yeah, look at the bills in your bill book. You can find your committee assignments again on the app. And of course, Jeremy and I have emailed them to you as well. So, and to do research on them, look at the student guide, which is also on the app, and I believe myself has emailed to you. The student guide talks about, underneath the lobbyist section, talks about how to do research on bills. I highly recommend just doing actual research from like government agencies or educational groups or educational institutions or nonprofit organizations that do research. So find actual good raw research and use that information, statistics and whys. Those are the best forms. I don't recommend using articles at all. It's typically just someone's opinion on research instead of the actual research itself. So use a lot of times your librarian can help you out, and there's databases that your school pays for that you can look up really easy to find research on. So that's my recommendation. Let's see, I believe there's another one. Let's see, our notes just included seat numbers, names, and whatever message. Yes, I believe that was Samantha's question. Yes, if you're writing a note, all you need to do is write the message, name of the person that you want it to go to, and seat number. That's all you really need, and the college staff member will send it to you. To Daniel, no, the executive office is not in the hotel. It is in the Capitol building, and our MGA has both headquarters room, both in the hotel and in the Capitol building. So I apologize to make that a little more clear, but the executive office is in the Capitol building right across from the MGA headquarters that's in the Capitol as well, which is somewhere in the middle of the main floor there of the Capitol. I say main floor because the first floor is technically like the ground floor. So the main floor of the Capitol is where the executive office is.
It's the minority leader's office. If anyone's looking on the House floor plan, it's the minority leader's office.
Correct. Yeah, and Jeremy, you are right. Sorry, I'm reading through everybody's as well. So let's see. Tally has a question. How many committee members belong to each committee? That depends if you're in the House or the Senate. The House obviously has a greater number of people. That's somewhere around, Sharon, correct me if I'm wrong, somewhere around 20 to 25, something like that. And of course, there's probably somewhere around 12 to 15 in the Senate committee. So it depends on if you're in the House or the Senate.
You are correct, and I think she might have been confused with the graphic before. Sometimes there are 1 or 2 lobbyists per committee, but each committee, like Spencer said, is 12 to 15, I think, for the Senate and 20 to 25 for the House. So there's 1 or 2 lobbyists per committee.
Oh, yes, yeah, okay, I completely did not read the rest of her question, which is my fault. So yeah, what Sharon was saying, exactly, there's about, depending on if you're in the House or Senate, it depends on how many committee members, but there's anywhere between 15 to 25 committee members, and some of them will represent the bills and then some won't. They're just voting members, but there's, as Sharon was saying, there's either 1 or 2 lobbyists in each committee. Tassano has one. Are committees just composed of lobbyists and bill patrons? Pretty much, yes. No, not quite, sorry. So committees are composed of lobbyists, bill patrons, and then non-bill patron legislators. So pretty much lobbyists, bill patrons, and then there are other legislators that are there that are just there as voting members. They're not representing any bill.
And Spencer, let's also mention we have resource advisors for every committee, and I think we're going to have at least 1 per committee. And these are people who are actual real-life lobbyists or state agency employees or legislators. And their job is to help out in committee just to make sure things are running smoothly. They can be a great resource for all of you. It would be wonderful if you introduce yourself to them ahead of time, because many of them are actual lobbyists and would love to give you some tips.
Yeah, and to Daniel's question, you can absolutely communicate with legislators outside committee chambers. I mean, if you're outside of committee chambers, I suppose you can communicate through notes, but most of the time you can just pull them aside after a chamber committee is done and talk to them in person. But if you're talking about while committee and chambers are actually taking place, you can, yes, communicate them through notes by sending it to them, or you can send a note to them asking if they can step out of committee or chamber and speak to them as well, which reporters will also do. So those are pretty much the ways that you can communicate with legislators while the process is going on. I believe Jamila, you said that. Yes, so Jamila, there is an app. I'm trying to think, who would have it? It is called the YAP, so APP. Jeremy, I just believe, posted the iPhone version of it. There's an Android version as well. But basically, it's called the YAP, and what you'll do is you'll download it under VA, YMCA, MGA. So Sharon, I don't know if you want to text that information in the thing, so that way everybody's got it. But
what I'll do is I will send it to Spencer and let you email it out. But there's a link you go to specifically, and it will download it because you can't just get YAP. You have to log in with our information. So I will send the link to Spencer, or he can get it from the workshop webinar and just email it to you all.
yes, I'll get that information and send it to Jeremy. Have Jeremy send it to you all. That's what I'll do. I'll just pass the buck off to Jeremy. That's what he's here for. So let's see. We got another one. So if there are multiple lobbyists in our committees, are we allowed to work together? Absolutely. So you're more than welcome to work together if there's more than one lobbyist in your committee. You're not required to. You can most definitely have opposing positions on the bills that are in your committee. That's perfectly fine. But you're not required. We do not tell you what positions you have, just like we don't require you to have the same position. You can absolutely work together. That is more than okay. That's encouraged. To Jamila's, nope, it's not just on iPhone. It's also, as Sharon will say, on any smartphone or tablet for the app. Anybody have any questions? Great questions, by the way. Let's see. Will you and your other committee members be together at all or most times? So, no. I'm not 100% sure what you mean by that, but no, you won't be with the same committee the entire time. So, if, as I was talking about before, let's say you're assigned to the Senate Committee on Education. When you go to that committee Thursday and you have the bills that you're assigned to, crossover is going to happen. Crossover is when the House finishes with their bills and the Senate finishes with their bills, and then they swap. So basically, the Senate sends the House the Senate bills, and the House sends the House bills. So when that happens, you will follow the Senate bills on education to the House. So you will actually present in a whole nother committee, a whole different committee after crossover happens. So you won't be with your committee members the entire time. In fact, you'll present on Friday afternoon in front of a whole different committee.
Yeah, Spencer, I think she meant the other lobbyist, if there's another lobbyist with her. And yes, you will be together quite a bit because you will be the two lobbyists in the room together. But like Spencer said, you don't have to work together because you may not agree on everything. If you do agree on something, it will be really smart to work together. But if you disagree, you don't have to work together.
Yes, and if and you aren't technically together during chambers, though you are watching the same chambers, so you can obviously work together during that time as well. But feel free to be more independent during chambers, considering you'll probably want to go back and forth to the governor's office at different times. That way, it looks like more people are lobbying for this bill than just two. So there you go. Yes, Daniel, you're more than welcome to unmute and ask your question.
So, can you hear me?
I can, faintly, but yes.
Hold on. So, based on my experience from last year, I was, I think, a senator last year. So, if I send, let's say, a note to somebody in chamber, I mean, you know, when the bill comes, when their bill comes on the floor, I mean, there's not a lot of time in that, you know, little section to speak to them because, you know, they're conferencing about their bill and everything. So I guess the only real time to make a difference on somebody's bill and whether like an amendment or not would in the chamber would be through notes before they present or before their bill is called on.
So you're talking about getting information to someone in chambers to basically, if you're a lobbyist and you want information on a bill to happen on a certain bill to do it before the bill is presented. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, like I feel like if I'm gonna make if I'm gonna do something to a bill, I obviously can't step in the middle of it being introduced on the floor. I have to do it beforehand, right?
So yes and no. There, depending on how much debate is on the bill, there are a lot of times that you do have enough time to quickly get information down to chambers and have it presented in chambers. But then again, it also determines, that's one of the tricky parts, is it does determine whether or not the person that you give that information to is called on the floor. Yeah, if you do know that you have something ahead of time that you want to be said in chambers on the floor, by all means, yeah, write it out and get it to somebody in chambers before it's spoken on, so that way they have ample opportunity to get called on. But you do have the opportunity to still do it while the bill is being talked about. Your just chances of them getting called on are dwindled a little bit.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, and excellent question.
All right, Spencer, there's another question there about contacting lobbyists ahead of time, or contacting other people, I guess, in their committee ahead of time. What we are going to do is hopefully by Friday, when I'm not traveling anymore, I will create a Facebook event for MGA, and it will be a way that you all can contact and try and find people from a certain school if you're interested. If you want to contact the other lobbyist in your group, I believe that all of the emails were in the email that Spencer and Jeremy both sent, but if you want the other one's email specifically, I'm sure Spencer or Jeremy could pass that along to you.
Yes. What Sharon said. All right, any final questions? Good deal. Jeremy, did you have any final thing that you wanted to say?
I'll say on that note about the email, I know that mine was BCC'd, so if you want the email of another lobbyist and it wasn't on Spencer's either, then just send me an email and I can give you that. Spencer, let you get to that other question that was just asked.
Oh yes. So we're not allowed to bring our computers / laptops into committee, right? So we highly encourage you not to bring any electronics to, really the only people that can bring laptops and computers to the Capitol buildings are reporters. That's because they have to use it in order to write articles and whatnot. So we prefer you to print out and write down all of your research ahead of time. So hopefully that answers that question. Otherwise,
I think if you feel like you need it for research, then bring it, but just note that you're liable for it and that you should not have your electronics out in committee. If you want to sit and do research at the Capitol, that's one thing, but in committee, you shouldn't have it out.
Yeah, I would, if you want to do research or something, I would recommend, if you've got a smartphone, just use that. One, it's a lot more portable and it's easier actually to keep up with, but yeah, so you can't really have it out in committee at all. So my recommendation is print everything ahead of time. And you need to do any research, use like a smartphone or something. I believe we had another one. Let's see. So if you find issues with the bill, and try to get a legislator to propose it, but is it also acceptable to just lobby against the legislation? Absolutely. So if you see a bill that you're kind of on the fence about, that there may be, if there's just this 1 or 2 sections of the bill that if it was changed you would be for, then I would recommend, yeah, go for an amendment. Create an amendment and have a legislator introduce it. But if you just feel like you cannot be for this legislation at all, then by all means you can, it is perfectly acceptable for you to just be completely opposed to it.
And I will say from real life experience, yesterday getting shot down while lobbying for a bill in a congressman's office, it's much better to work together to try and find a common solution than to just be told flat out no. So I would definitely try to find common ground that would make it something that you would accept rather than just going against legislation. But I think that if there's a piece of legislation that you just really do not like at all, feel free to oppose.
Yeah, the committee process is really to, the main part of the committee process is to really view all the bills and figure out what you can change to make them better. It's really the time to make a bunch of amendments to a bill. And then the floor is when the entire House decides whether or not they want the bill to continue or not. So most bills will not die in committee. They will die on the floor, or they'll pass on the floor, of course. But the committee process is really the ample opportunity to try to make changes if you can. But if you feel that the bill is just completely unacceptable, then you can wholeheartedly oppose it. So Friday night reporting session, I'm trying to remember, I believe that's at the hotel. The Friday night reporting session is kind of a wrap up from the day and to talk about some information that needs to be passed on to Saturday as well, and to prep you for the chambers part of crossover, which happened early Saturday morning. So that Friday night, the recording session there in the hotel, which you have to walk back to anyway. So that is it's pretty quick that time. It's a pretty good time to go to the youth governors. So my suggestion to go to the youth governor, the best time is during chambers. On that point, my best suggestion is to go during chambers when your bills are not being talked about in chambers. So if the House and Senate's in session and you need to speak to the youth governor and attorney general, then my recommendation is to go when you think that your bills in committee are not being talked about, which you can tell. They go in order typically, 1 through 25 if you're in the Commonwealth, or 51 through 75 if you're in Old Dominion. So I would go during that time.
And I would also say too that you can see the youth governor multiple times about the same issue. If you want to talk right away on Friday morning about what happened in committee last night, and then that afternoon after chamber, talk about what happened in the chamber, and then if you want to Saturday morning, you can. Don't do it too much, but you could definitely go a couple of times to really make your point.
Yes, which you have time. Is there a schedule for which bills are talked about in chamber? Are there exact times, or is it just whenever they get the bill? So the presiding officer takes the entire time that they have in chambers and divides it up amongst how many bills they have. So it really depends on how many bills pass committee, which should be majority of them. So I would try to go and speak to the youth governor or the attorney general before, at least a few bills before. They go in order by number, unless someone motions to pass by temporarily a bill, which rarely ever happens in chambers. But if that does happen, then that bill's put at the end of the docket. So they go in numerical order pretty much, as long as they have passed committee, which most of them should, at least the first round. And it really depends on how many bills. So the second time you're in chambers, it could be, it could take a lot longer to get to the next bill because there's less bills by the time you get to the chambers the second time. So sorry, I don't have more of an exact answer on that, but it really depends.
Well, and also if you have resolutions, which I think only Old Dominion has resolutions, they are heard last. So it basically goes in the order of the bill book.
Yes. So they go in pretty much in numerical order. All right, well, if you don't have any more questions, or Jeremy, do you have something else? I don't know, I think we cut you off to answer questions.
The last thing I'll say is just that we're going to be a team, and I would really appreciate it if you always tell me if for some reason you're going to be late to a strategy session or something like that, because we are going to be in Richmond, and I don't want to be wondering if somebody has kidnapped you and that's why you weren't late. That's why you were late. We'll most likely be setting up a group meet. I'm assuming that from years past, which is basically a group chat where we'll communicate. So just try to be punctual and try to be respectful to my peace of mind if for some reason you're unable to be at a place where you need to be on the schedule. And if we do that, then we're going to have a great time.
Yeah, you should always, if you need to miss a strategy session, you need to get it approved by Jeremy ahead of time. And it should be for reasons only pretty much the youth governor or your bills are being presented in chamber floors or something. So those should really be the only reasons. But yeah, let Jeremy know ahead of time. I'm glad it was helpful. I appreciate it, Daniel. So that concludes our webinar, which is not wanting to. There we go. That concludes our webinar. Appreciate